shoot, I forgot a book. Hello my loves, and thank you for joining me. It's Kirsten, and today we're doing my April wrap up. I was about to say March, but this year is just flying by. Anyway, beside the point, I do this as a smash or pass, so I get all the books, talk about them, and tell you whether I would smash or pass the book, depending on how I felt about it. That's all it is. Let's get straight to this, starting off with the fact that I'm in the middle of a book. Where has it gone? So I did start The Traitor Barrow Cormorant by Seth Dickinson. This is the UK copy. I have the US edition, but that's in a pile of books right now. And I started this, really excited to carry on with this one, but I am going to be restarting and reading it in the US edition, just because I prefer that cover and I think it's going to be much easier to annotate. I got to part 2, so I read 128 pages and I was tabbing. This one is all about Barrow. Her home country has been invaded by this empire, and they have just assimilated everything and made it so that her way of life, her people's way of life, is completely wrong and sinful, and so people are now being corrected in their way of thinking about things. And you're seeing how this takeover comes about through the smallest of things, and how it can start so slowly, and then before you know it, that's it, your way of life, your culture is gone. And Barrow has decided that she is going to infiltrate the empire so that she can change what has happened, so that she can get retribution for what has happened. As a result of doing this though, she has to make some really difficult choices, because she has to act as part of the empire, and that what they're doing is not morally sound, and so she struggles with a lot of this. There is a lot going in. That's a really brief summary. Definitely want to continue on with this one, but I just wanted to quickly mention it's not in my April wrap up, but I did start it in April and I will be restarting hopefully soon, but it depends when I get around to picking this one back up again. But I really enjoyed it. And now that brings us to everything that I read. I didn't finish my April TBR. I actually only read I think 3 or 4 out of all the books that I was meant to read, so yeah, that didn't go amazingly well. Starting off as I always do with the ebooks that I read this month, which wasn't many this month. I started off with Blood Mercy by Vera Roth, and this ended up being a DNF. I really couldn't get on with it. I think I managed to get about 150, or was it closer to 200 pages in, and I could not get past the amount of info dumping in this book. We were just told so much what felt like irrelevant information that, considering how long this book series is, it could have been done much better, much smoother throughout the whole series, rather than just giving us all this information about these Hesperines straight away. And it just didn't seem to make any sense. Now, Hesperines are basically vampires. I couldn't get past the fact that I felt like they were Twilight ripoffs. I mean, apart from the fact that they don't sparkle, it really did feel like they were Twilight vampires. Once I made that connection, I couldn't unsee it, and this is a fantasy romance, and the way that the romance started is because our main Hesperine smelled her, and it's just that scene from Twilight, you know, couldn't not make that connection. And then on top of this, we have our main human character, and she is absolutely terrified of her father, who is the king. She is his illegitimate offspring, and so she's like terrified of him because he's meant to be this really ruthless king, but we haven't seen him do anything, and I just kept being told how bad he is but not shown anything. I just couldn't do it. I really couldn't do it. And I know lots of people have really enjoyed this book, and lots of people do say it gets better after this point, but I could not force myself to get through it anymore, so that was a DNF. Then I read Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas, and so the DNF is definitely a pass, by the way, because did not enjoy that. Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. This is actually another pass, but it's better because I didn't DNF this one, and this kind of gave me exactly what I wanted it for. So this is a romance book. I think it's actually, with this class as contemporary romance, I'm not sure, but it's a romance book. There's no fantasy or anything to it. It's an age gap romance. We have our main character, and she, I think, is it Alex? don't ask me about names. But she and her boyfriend ends up having to live with her boyfriend's father because her boyfriend's been an idiot. And he's getting more and more distant, the boyfriend, and she's growing closer and closer to the father, and they end up having this romance, and you're seeing all of that happen. Obviously, it's taboo because of the massive age gap, the fact that he's her boyfriend's father. There's a lot going on in this book, but it was an entertaining, quick read while I was at work, and I needed something that was just a bit mindless. For the month of April, in all honesty, I was going through a bit of a reading slump. I've read a lot, but I wasn't really feeling any of the books, to be honest. There's a couple that I really did enjoy, but other than that, a lot of the books I was just like meh about. And this was a book that just helped me go, you know what, I want to read, and this is something so easy to follow. It's mindless. I'm not going to reread it. It's not the best written. There were parts in it that I just felt were a bit redundant, but it did exactly what I needed in that it was easy to read and it gripped me just enough that I would keep coming back to it. And so that's what I needed for that little moment in time, and that worked perfectly. Overall though, it is a pass and it's not something I would reread. And then we go on to the rest of the books, and I'm going to do what I always do and just randomly pick out the books. So, starting off with the Rabbitback Literature Society. This is translated from Finnish, and I enjoyed this book actually. This is probably one of the highlights of the month, and this is what I mean by I actually do have quite a few books in this pile that I did enjoy, but for some reason my mood towards reading just wasn't there. So this is a smash. It is a weird book. This is technically a dark academia book. We're following our main character, Ella, and Ella is a literature teacher, and she's moved back to this small town to be with her parents, and things start going a bit wrong when she gets accepted into this elite literature society, and they have this weird game that they do that's very intrusive into other people's thoughts and feelings, and some of the things that happen are just bizarre in this book. It's very much left up to you. This is not a book that gives you answers. You have to decide for yourself the things that are going on. There's also a lot of Finnish folklore that's wrapped around this, so I definitely want to read more of that because I feel like once I've read more I will have more of an understanding of this book. But I really did enjoy this one. I annotated this one, and my annotations, I always go for different colours for each book because I like to go with the cover. I like it to match. But we had dark blue for quotes that I really love, things that were meaningful. We had light blue for books changing what they say, which was a big part of this book, where the text inside a book would change, and the longer you left it, the more weirder it got. And so that was very unusual. Then we have this kind of like greyish colour, and that was for sinister and creepy moments that wasn't to do with the society, but was just very eerie. I think this atmosphere was done really well. I'm really pleased that I read this at the very beginning of April because it was still a bit cold, and this is set in winter, so it kind of worked. I wish I'd read it earlier in the year, but I don't think I had it then. Or maybe I did. I don't know. But it worked really well for very beginning of April when it was still quite cold outside. So that worked. And just, yeah, the atmosphere. Sinister, creepy. Then we had purple for the Literature Society rules. Things that were just unusual and weird. And so that was that part because there was a lot that you were learning about it. And then the very last one is like this peachy colour. And that's for dreams and nightmares because that was a massive thing about this book where the town would have collective dreams and nightmares, which I found very fascinating. So yeah, this is definitely a book I would reread, would recommend, wouldn't recommend to everyone. I would say if you liked Bunny, if you liked Vita Nostra, if you like those weird sort of books, give it a try. If you don't go for this. It's going to be annoying for you. But I really enjoyed it. Okay, then we have another book that was a pass. I think these next ones are all ones that I read during 24-hour readathon. Oh shoot, I forgot a book. I did read one more ebook. I forgot about that. Let me quickly put that in. So I was actually reading it at the very end of March, but I didn't include it in the March wrap up, and that is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. It was available on Kindle Unlimited, and I read it for the catch up book club that is run by Becca. I will have a channel linked below. They've been making their way through the First Law trilogy, and I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. So this is a smash, and this is a epic fantasy, but it's very slow plot wise. It's mainly focusing on our three main characters. I think I'll go into it all a bit more when I hold up a different physical book that's to do with that. But yeah, I forgot that was actually another ebook that I read, and that was very good. I enjoyed that one. But back to this. So I did my 24-hour readathon. I do them bi-monthly, and I did this one on the 1st of April, I want to say. That's Mrs. Death, Mrs. Death by Salim Godden, and yeah, no, I didn't like this one. It ended up being a DNF. I didn't get far into it, but just the structure of it. There is a lot of poetry in here, and I tried reading some of the poetry and I couldn't get on with it. I also feel like the writing itself was a bit excessive, because the parts that were written felt over wordy just for the sake of it, and yeah, I just couldn't get on with this one, so that's a pass. And I went into this in more detail with the 24-hour readathon, so I'll link that below if you're interested. I couldn't get on with this. I wanted to like it because it was so unusually written, and I thought it was a really interesting concept that we're following Death, and she is an actual character in this book, which I really like, and she's telling her story to this young writer, but it just didn't hit with me, unfortunately. So that is a unfortunate pass, and I think I'm gonna unhaul this book. So I've actually filmed an unhaul video and forgot to include this one, but that one will be included in the unhaul. Carrying on with that readathon, I was actually feeling incredibly slumpy that day. I think this was kind of the start of how I was feeling for the rest of the month, and picking up Mrs. Death didn't help. So I then switched gears completely and went for a manga day and completely tossed my TBR out the window. Honestly, that was the April TBR out the window. Didn't work for anything. Didn't work for the readathon, didn't work for the month. But I did end up reading volumes 9, 10 and 11 of Tokyo Ghoul, and I enjoyed all of these. These are all passes. Passes? No, they're all smashes. Oh my god, what am I saying? I really enjoyed all of these. Tokyo Ghoul is a manga where we're looking at our main character, who is part human, part ghoul, and so he's in this very unique position where he's able to see both sides of this conflict. Ghouls are humans that need human flesh to survive. It is technically like a horror manga, but I'm going to say it's a more of a lighter horror manga. I don't know, I haven't read loads, but it's not like Junji Ito. Not that I've read his books, but from what people say, it's not like that. Anyway, I enjoyed this. I thought it was really good. I would have actually finished out the series, but I only have up to volume 11. I have since tried looking for volume 12, haven't been able to find it anywhere. As soon as I get my hands on it, I'm going to finish out this series. There's only volume 12 and 13 left to go. I'm really pleased that this series picked back up, because volume 8 and half of volume 7 weren't it for me. It felt like it was just being overly violent for no actual reasoning behind it, but then we got back to the story in these last few volumes, and I really have enjoyed it, and I really want to finish the series if I can find the manga. So those were 3 smashes, absolutely loved. Another smash was Othello by William Shakespeare, and this is the full original text manga classic edition, and I love these. I love these so much. Basically what's happened is the text of the play Othello has been put to manga. So you have all the text that gets done, but it's put to beautiful artwork, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I loved this story. It was beautiful and heartbreaking, and I thought it was great. I definitely want to get the Penguin classics of the William Shakespeare plays so that I can annotate, because I don't want to be annotating in a manga. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to do that. I love it for this. However, this is really good. If you're a bit worried about getting into classics, pick up the manga classics if you like manga. There's such an easy way for you to see what is happening in the book, and I think especially with plays it works particularly well, because obviously plays weren't meant to be read, they were meant to be seen, and so this, just the connection that you can make, I love these so much. I definitely need to get more. I want to get more manga classics. I think that's what I would like to do, is the next set of book buying that I do is actually to be focused on manga, because I'm running out and I would love to read more, but that probably won't happen for a little while, because I am trying to not buy any books for the next like at least month, give myself a chance to get some of my TBR done. But yeah, that was fantastic. I'm going on so many tangents today, I'm so sorry. Then sticking with the sort of like easier reads, I also read If You're Stubby by Kaz Witness. This is a comic. This has just been put into a hardback, and it's just a comic of this unicorn that solves things in a very not great way. It took me like 10 minutes to read. It's easy, it's fun, I like the art style, it's silly. This is going to be a smash, a lighter smash, more of a kiss on the lips than anything else. But it was good, it was fun, it was easy to read, and I liked some of the humour in this. It's very dark humour, and that's the sort of humour that I like, so yeah, that worked well. So once I decided to ditch the TBR, my readathon then went really well and I really enjoyed it. I did also finish one book in that TBR day? No, the readathon day. That wasn't on my TBR, but it was something that I was in the middle of reading, and that is The Witcher, The Last Wish, and I really enjoyed this. This is the beautiful illustrated edition and I loved it. This is a series of short stories set in the Witcher world, and this takes place before the first book. So it's like a prequel of short stories. There is another book that is also a prequel of another set of short stories, and this is all based on folklore. It kind of reminds me of the Grimm's fairy tales, but I do believe that this is Polish folklore. So again, something that I want to explore more of. However, I did see some reoccurring themes, so like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Cinderella, Rapunzel, things like that were all connections to it. And I feel like folklore in general seems to connect to each other with terms of the stories that get told. I loved this. This was absolutely another smash. And that's something that I have found this month. I've done quite a lot of folklore reads and they have been all my favourites. I think just like I say, my mood towards reading in April wasn't there. So far May's going better. And I actually don't think I'm going to have many passes because this was a good reading month, but emotionally it wasn't there. Don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, carrying on, we have a book actually that is a pass, I think, and that's 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. This is Greek mythology, and what Natalie Haynes has done she's taken the Trojan War and written it from the female perspective. Now, this is done as a series of short stories as well. You have an overarching story that's being told by this muse. She's telling this story to a poet that's writing it, and she's talking to the reader at points saying, oh, I bet he wishes that he would have more heroic things that are going on, but that's not the way this is. And I liked her points of view in this book. I thought that was really good. Then one perspective we keep going back to is just called The Trojan Women, but we're kind of focusing on Paris's family because this is the whole Battle of Troy with Helen, and we're focusing on Paris's mother and his sisters. So someone you may know of is Cassandra. She's mentioned quite a lot. There's been a lot of retellings about her lately, which I think is fantastic. And then we have Paris's mother, who is then thinking about these other women within the war that's happened, and that's where the other short stories come in. The only thing I didn't like about this is that some women were given a much longer part, which I enjoyed, and some were given a lot shorter that I wish we'd seen more of, and I understand why that was done in particular. However, there was one perspective who I really got frustrated with, and that's Penelope, which is an interesting one to say that I'm frustrated with because I actually do like Penelope's perspective. Penelope is Odysseus's wife. Odysseus is someone that went to the Trojan War, and then the Odyssey by Homer is his story trying to get back home, which took an extra 10 years. And we're seeing Penelope writing letters to Odysseus. Now that theory in of itself I thought would have been fantastic, but we do not get Penelope's story. We're just having Penelope tell Odysseus' story. And that's what got so frustrating about it, is that this whole book, the point of it was that we were seeing the women, the dog's here, so if you can hear snuffing, it's him. It felt like Natalie Haynes just used Penelope's perspective to retell the tale of the Odyssey. And it's fine because I want to read the Odyssey, so now I know what to expect, but it doesn't seem to fit with the point of what was going on. And so for that reason, this is a pass. I think this is fantastic if you're starting and you're wanting to get into Greek mythology, yep. Otherwise, I just couldn't. Personally, I couldn't get on with it, which was annoying. Okay, we have 4 more to go. We have a reread, which was Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, and I loved this. I annotated it. I bought these hardback, beautiful hardback editions specifically so I could annotate these, and I'm so happy with it. I really enjoyed this. This is a YA fantasy series, and the first 3 books, in all honesty, is your typical YA fantasy from that time period. And bearing in mind that these are older stories now. How old is this? First published in 2012. I loved it though. I thought it was fantastic. This lighting's going in and out. I'm sorry, this cloudy day. So it's that typical YA fantasy from that time where you have your typical tropes, you've got your love triangle, you've got your chosen one thing. And as I was reading this, I can say from a critical point of view, this book really should probably be a pass. However, I love it so much. I have so much nostalgia. I was reading this series as they were being released. I was anxiously anticipating the next book, and for that reason alone, this is always going to be a smash. I love Sarah J Maas. I love her characters. I love how far in advance she was thinking about things, because there are things in this book that I have been tabbing that relate to later series and things that happen in, and I love it for that. The character development in here I really like seeing, where Celine starts to then where she ends up at the end of the series, because she really does start off as someone that you don't really like. She's insipid and vain and silly, but at the same time she's a teenage girl, so she's entitled to be all of those things, and I just love it. I love all of it. I love the interactions and stuff. So yeah, this was a smash. I loved it, and I'm so pleased I reread it. I definitely needed a reread this month, because as much as I was enjoying the folklore reads that I had this month and the other books that I had, I needed something that made me go, yes, I'm happy, this is comforting, and I love it, and that's what that book was. So that was great. Speaking of folklore though, we do have another folklore retelling, and that is Juniper and Thorne by Ava Reid. Well, technically this is a fairy tale retelling, but this is a retelling of the Juniper Tree by the Grimm's brothers, which is arguably the darkest fairy tale out of that collection, and I really enjoyed this retelling, and this is a smash from me. I thought it was fantastic. It is very dark. Check your trigger warnings. We're following our main character, whose name I can never pronounce properly, but it's like Marilynchin. She is a daughter to this really horrible wizard, and she does have powers herself. She lives with two sisters. They also have powers, but there is something dark that's happening in the town, and she is determined to try and fix things, if only to help this ballet person that she's met, that she kind of loves, and she wants to try and protect him as much as she can. And you're seeing everything go darker and fall apart, and the things that happen, the twists and turns that it takes. Fantastic. Oh shoot, hang on a minute, I read another book, because I also read the Juniper Tree. So I didn't read this whole collection, I just read the Juniper Tree, which wasn't long, but I read it because I was reading Juniper and Thorne. So I read the start of this, then I picked up the Juniper Tree and read that, and then I carried on with this. And that I would always recommend doing. If you're reading a retelling of something, I would always recommend reading the original, because it really does show you where the author got their inspirations from, the things that they have changed and twisted and expanded upon, and I loved it. To everyone that goes on saying that there are certain things in this book which are so unnecessary, I would say read this then, because it's in here. The thing that I'm referencing is cannibalism. Cannibalism is in this, but that's because it is in a massive part of the actual Juniper Tree fairy tale. It couldn't have been a proper retelling if it just glossed over that part. So I think it worked. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Both of these were a smash. I really, really enjoyed it. Okay, so now we're on to the last two. Starting off with a book that I got sent from the publisher, so thank you once again to Serpent's Tail for sending me this. I was so ecstatic to receive it. This is The Human Origins of Beatrice Porter and Other Essential Ghosts by Soraya Palmer, and this came out on the 27th of April. This is a fantastic book. This is more of a literary fiction woven in with folklore, but it was so good. I thought it was beautiful. So I'm going to talk through the tabs. I've actually tabbed a lot of books, but I'll talk through tabs on this one because I've still got the tabs in here. I knew I was missing tabs. Again, this is a book that you need to check your trigger warning. Oh, that's why the tabs are in here, because I haven't written up the tab sheet like I normally do. Well, that's going to be interesting as to whether I remember it or not. But I'm pretty sure this pinky colour was for things that I just loved. Honestly, the start of this sentence of this book was fan-frickin-tastic. I loved it so much. Brilliant start to a book. Then we have Orange, and this is for all of the folklore references. This book is based in Caribbean folklore, which was so interesting to read. Then we have this lighter green, and that is for all moments of just like heartbreak. There are certain things that are happening. We have a lot of abuse towards children, spousal abuse, and those sort of heartbreaking moments in this book, and that's why I tabbed with the green. We're seeing how these two sisters, you have Zora and Sasha, they are two sisters that are growing up in this very angry, toxic household, and you're seeing how as young children they clung together and made up stories and told each other tales to try and get through things, and then as they grow up how they separate in different ways, exploring things in different ways, and seeing how that happens within families, how you can grow apart, but at the end of it all you come back together. And I thought it was fantastic, and I think it was only those 3 colours that I used. Yes, it was, but it was really, really beautiful, really loved it, and I definitely want to read more books about Caribbean folklore because I found this so interesting. But as I say, do check your trigger warnings going into this. Honestly, I might have to do a folklore video of the different folklores that I have read from like different cultures, because I feel like that would be really interesting. But I do want to read a few more before I get to that. Anyway, the last book that I read in April was Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie. This is the second book in the First Law trilogy. So as I said, I read The Blade itself at the start of the month, kind of finished it. Started it in March, finished it in April, and started this one at the end of the month. And I really enjoyed this. I'm enjoying this trilogy as a whole, to be honest. I will say that this is not a plot-heavy series at all. This is all about your characters. And we're following our 3 main characters in the first book. By the 4th book, we kind of have 4. But it kind of starts off with these 3 characters who are all very completely different, and you're following them individually, and by the end of the first book you've seen them convene in different ways, and then from this second book they're going off again. So you have a couple of them that have joined up together, so one of them being Giselle. He is a pompous ass, he is a fencing person, and he believes himself to be elite in society, in the Union. And then we have Logan, who Giselle sees as this barbaric Northman who has no culture, no civilization, and is beneath his notice. However, those 2 end up going on a quest together with this wizard, and you really don't know what this quest is about until the very end of the second book. So it's only just starting to get explained then, although it all goes terribly wrong. Then, as I mentioned, we did have a third perspective, and that one is Glotter, and he is a torturer who was tortured himself. So he was tortured first, he was a soldier, and then when he's come back, he's become a torturer himself for the Union, and his part is more political, so you'll find a lot more of the political goings with his perspective because that's what he's entangled up in. The plot of this, however, is that there is a war going on, and there's a war from 2 fronts. The Union is having to deal with a war from the north and also from the south, and they're overstretched and they're trying to deal with all of this, and at the same time you have Giselle and Logan off on this quest. Everything is going wrong at the end of this book. I cannot wait to pick up the 3rd book, and I have to thank Eric so much for lending me these to read. It's been great. I've really enjoyed this. So that is another smash. Oh, and if I didn't say this was a smash as well, but I think that would have been obvious. So overall, this month has been a smash. We've had 2 DNFs. Honestly, I think 1 other pass. So it has been a really good reading month, but just for some reason my mood's not been there, and I think it was just the books that I had chosen to read I was no longer feeling like reading, and so the ones that I did read off my TBR felt kind of forced, and so I wasn't enjoying the experience of it as much. However, I can say, looking back on all of these books, they all had things that I really did enjoy, apart from obviously the 4 passes. So overall, again, a really strong reading month. It's just every so often I will go through that phase where I'm just not feeling like following my TBRs, but the month of May has started and I am really excited to read all the books on my TBR, so hopefully that has passed and April was just a little blip. But you'll have to let me know, how did your month go? Have you read any of these? What was your favourite book from April, or what was your least favourite? Let me know. And I think we're gonna leave it there. So thank you so much for watching. I think if you've made it this far, what emoji should we do? There was a lot of folklore in this, so maybe put a fairy emoji? Let's go with a fairy. How many books on folklore did we read, like inspired by? We've got 1, 2, 3, 5 books based on some form of folklore and fairy tales. That is pretty amazing, honestly. It's a shame that the mood wasn't there for the month, because otherwise this would have been one of the best reader months I've had, because folklore and fairy tales is something that I want to focus on this year, and we did that very well. But yeah, okay, well, I'm still rambling. Fairy in the comments below if you've made it this far, and yes, we're gonna go. So thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed, then please do give it that thumbs up, subscribe and comment. Those 3 things really help this channel grow. My social media links and anyone I've mentioned will be linked below, and I will of course catch you in the very next video.